So audience on either side, and it's a fantastic experience. But also it's been done this time to bring everything in a lot and make it quite intimate, because you just have one simple set. It's just a table, office space. This is a new play by Joe Penhall, and it's addressing very, very current issues of safety, especially for people in public service. Doctors, nurses, teachers, and of course, as you know, politicians that are at risk and being attacked. So we have Joe Cox, Sir David Amess, and we have politicians talking about cancelling their surgeries, not wanting to appear in public, teachers being threatened. And James Corden plays an ex-serviceman who is going through a difficult divorce, dealing with a lot of PTSD, also feeling very much like fathers are overlooked, and he wants to fight for their rights. And an old school friend is a local MP, played by Anna Maxwell Martin. And he goes in to start talking to her, and it starts off quite chummy and jovial, and then it darkens and darkens. He gets quite aggressive and frustrated. She wants to help. She's an absolute idealist. This politician's sense of we don't choose who we work for. You know, we are here by duty to work for everybody in our constituency. It spirals a lot. I have to say, Corden, sensational. Really? He really is a fantastic actor. Of all of them, he's so natural, and he has the most difficult role where his character is shifting all the time and becomes potentially quite threatening and dangerous, but then there's also a beautiful catharsis at the end.
The People's Channel.
Morning, 9:30 on Tuesday, the 9th of July, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning to you. So, increase in defence spending, is it needed? As Russia bombs a children's hospital in Ukraine, the former head of the army calls for more money for our military, warning we are only fit to fight for a month.
And already there's a row over the new government. There's a row over the Prime Minister appointing Annalise Dodds to the role of Women's Minister, leaving feminist campaigners furious. It's because she said this to the BBC about women 2 years ago.
What's the definition of a woman?
Well, I have to say that there are different definitions legally around what a woman actually is.
And shocking smoking statistics. Smoking-related cancers have reached a record high despite a fall in smoking rates. Why might that be? We'll crunch the numbers for you.
And Shadow Cabinet, Lord David Cameron has quit frontline politics. Funny that, as Sunak announces his interim top team. Is anyone listening to the Tories?
And Sir Tony Blair will speak at the Future of Britain conference this morning. He's going to detail his hopes for the new Labour government. You don't want to miss that. And what you don't want to miss is Man and Andrew's reaction to what he has to say. So let's cross live now to Tony Blair, who's speaking at the annual Future of Britain conference in London.
Population are also against us. And this assumes we face nothing like another pandemic, whose bill was a whopping £373 billion, or an energy crisis which cost £52 billion. And we have some deep structural health problems. There are rising numbers of long-term sick, of working age, big increases in disability benefits and in mental health spending. So we have an unsustainable situation. Britain is not alone in this. As you can see, most developed nations face a similar challenge, though Britain is in a worse position than most. The simple and unavoidable truth is that unless we improve growth and productivity and drive value and efficiency through our public services, we as a country, Britain, are going to become much poorer. Much poorer. And therefore our politics even more divided and fractured. Now, that might make us pessimistic, but I do not share the pessimism. On the contrary, I don't think there's ever been a better time to govern, a better time to effect change, a better basis for optimism, and a surer basis and reason for hope. If we understand how the world is changing and how we use that change to change our country. In the short term, as we highlighted last year, some clear early wins can help on growth and productivity. As my institute has never tired of pointing out, and as the new government indeed is pledged to do, planning reform, seemingly dry subject, has the best potential of delivering a boost to growth by conventional means. But that's not just for infrastructure like renewable energy, but also crucially for housing. And a better Brexit deal will also help. But there is only one game changer. Effectively, the 21st century technological revolution. This here is a quote from the head of the IMF, but frankly, it could have been from the head of virtually any global institution in the world. Already prior to 2022, we were living through a tech-inspired revolution. And we can see that by looking at the companies which now dominate global markets, but then compare them with the corporate giants of 1997. And in the purple, obviously, are the technology companies. But note not simply the domination of tech companies today, and incidentally see the two pharmaceutical companies in the list, both of whom are offering the new weight loss drugs, but see the size of today's giant companies, some 10 times the market cap of the giants of yesterday. And now, with the breakthrough represented by generative AI, there is going to be another revolution on top of this existing one. The opportunities are huge. The risks are huge. But there is absolutely no doubt that this is an era of transformation. As our two young speakers were saying just a moment ago, things which were impossible, advances which would have taken decades, will happen in a few years or months. The value we can add, the improvements in efficiency we can make, the radical benefits and outcomes that we can secure could be truly revolutionary if we seize the opportunity. And there will be many well-meaning parts of our system and politics who will resist, who will downplay the opportunity and focus on the risk. But the biggest risk is not being too bold, but too timid. The task before us is a great renewal, to be the first nation to show the full opportunity of governing in the age of artificial intelligence. In this new world, will either rise or fall. Now, the enormous blessing for the UK is that we are fortunately strong in the very thing which will determine success in artificial intelligence. We have some of the world's best universities. After America and China, we're in third place in many of the key indicators. We have in DeepMind, as we shall see later today, one of the best, possibly the best artificial intelligence company in the world. But we're in danger of forfeiting our position. Universities, clinical trials, data centers, these are the things vital to building strength in sectors like life sciences, financial services and manufacturing, and of course in AI itself. So focusing on this is the 21st century industrial strategy for a forward-looking British government. Already, the private sector is starting to adopt AI at scale, increasing investment, making savings, changing recruitment. You see there the Goldman Sachs prediction of a $1 trillion investment in AI over the next years by the tech giants and other leading companies. Over the next decade, the adoption of AI will add significantly to growth and over time could and should raise growth rates well over 2%. But we need government policy to lean in and accelerate its adoption. The TBI paper earlier this year had 22 recommendations covering everything from infrastructure to skills to procurement to reform of the capital markets to boost investment. However, for government, the most exciting opportunity the tech revolution can offer is in respect of government itself. Over the past months, TBI has been working on policy reports about AI, which for obvious reasons we didn't publish during the election, but we're publishing them now. And here is what they show. The report on how AI can be applied to the tasks of the public sector, that a fifth of workforce time could be saved just through applying existing AI solutions, creating £10 billion in annual savings at the end of the first term government and £34 billion at the end of the second. We then did a specific analysis of the Department of Work and Pensions, done in collaboration with Faculty AI, one of Britain's leading AI companies, showing how, again, presently available AI solutions could reduce backlogs, reimagine job centres, and cut benefit fraud. Then there is healthcare. We are living through a time of huge advance in medical science and treatment, all of it accelerated by artificial intelligence and the application of AI to data. Cardiovascular disease, obesity, cancer, all are being changed by means of treatment and cure, helping to reduce the crippling economic cost of preventable disease. For the first time, a healthcare system geared to prevention rather than cure is within our grasp. Today, a new TBI report, prepared with the help of Andrew Scott and his team of economic modelling experts, shows in dramatic terms the link between preventive healthcare and wealth.
So that's Sir Tony Blair, to give him his full moniker, speaking at something called the Future of Britain conference. It's being hosted by his Tony Blair Institute, which is an extraordinarily successful billion-pound industry, frankly.
As one of our viewers said, confidence trickster nodding to his sponsors there. Your response at home was one of exasperation, fury and confusion about why Tony Blair is on the stage today in the first week of a Labour administration, basically taking the reins off Sir Keir Starmer.
It's a bad look. Look, this conference will have been organised probably months in advance, but it's very bad time for Sir Keir Starmer because we know that a lot of his people have worked in Starmer's private office when he was leader of the opposition. They provided lots of policy documents. And on Sunday, in the front page of the Sunday Times, Blair was laying down the law to Starmer on immigration, saying you've got to sort immigration out, otherwise there'll be a problem with reform. Writ coming from him when he caused most of the immigration problems. This now will look like Keir Starmer is being told what to do.
I mean, he is. He clearly is. I mean, look, one of the things he said there is, he said, you know, one of the things that we're going to do for growth is planning reform. And Tony Blair said, it's a seemingly dry subject. No, Tony Blair, it is not a dry subject. It is a dry subject. Is it all you're bothered about is expanding your technocratic ambitions across the globe and filling your coffers at the expense of the British people? But if you are a person living in this country, actually, planning reform is really important.
It really is, because it's what the definition of Greenbelt is, because they're going to build on Greenbelt. And I heard the new local government minister, Jim McMahon, earlier talking about it won't be on the rolling hills of England. Well, that's all right then.
Yeah, well...
The hills roll, they won't build on them.
Let's talk to former Labour MP Bill Rammell, friend of the show. Morning, Bill. You can probably sense our frustration and certainly my anger that Tony Blair has taken this week to burst onto the stage and to talk about what are effectively globalist vision for this country. We need to sort our own house out before we start talking about putting money in the pockets of the Tony Blair Foundation.
Well, look, it's a non-profit making organisation, and I think Tony was talking
How much is he worth? Bill, how much is Tony Blair worth? How many millions, how many hundreds of millions is that man worth as a former Prime Minister?
And how much is John Major worth? And how much is David
Nothing
Cameron
like
worth?
what Tony Blair is worth. Nothing like it.
I don't think that's actually true. And this is a non-profit making foundation. Look, let's cut to the chase. He was talking an awful lot of sense about the priority for growth, the priority for planning reform, and the use of technology. This conference had been planned, as Andrew said, months and months in advance. None of it takes away from the way that this Labour government, led by Keir Starmer, has frankly hit the ground running, reaching out to all parts of the United Kingdom to try and restore the union, tackling immigration, turbocharging growth through significant planning reform, meeting with the junior doctors through the BMA today to get a resolution to their dispute that we desperately need. I have to say, after 3-4 days in power, this has been a really good start.
Were you not uncomfortable that there was Blair on the front page of the Sunday Times laying down the law in an op-ed article? Shouldn't he have waited? Not the first weekend of a new government, and now knowing that this conference was being held this week. Now, you heard me say earlier, of course this was booked months in advance, but the big article telling him what to do on immigration, and then the conference today, it does create an impression, which I suspect Blair doesn't mind, that he's very much back in vogue with in terms of
charge.
Well, I mean, I do think, and you know, there was one sentence in Tony Blair's article at the weekend about cutting immigration that has got a lot of headlines. And I do think Tony should recognise, one, that this Labour government is committed to cutting immigration, both illegal immigration, but also legal migration, but also should recognise that the inheritance of this Labour government led by Keir Starmer is so much more challenging than when Tony came to power in 1997. Now, you know, Tony's done what he's done. This conference was long planned. Be in no doubt moving forward, and Keir has demonstrated that clearly over the last few years with ruthless leadership of the Labour Party, that he is in charge and he will set the direction for the party and the government.
Bill, stay with us. We've got to take a quick break. Tony Blair said there, we will rise or fall at the moment. My fear is he will rise, we will fall.
Stay with us, Bill.
Newsroom.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign. And thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War. Restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother, and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
9:50, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
So before the break, we heard from Sir Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, and we're talking to the former Labour MP, Bill Rammer. Bill, you were elected in '97 in that first Blair landslide. I don't think the atmosphere has any comparison. I was reporting the Blair landslide in '97 as a political correspondent for The Times then. There was huge excitement, genuine optimism about this young telegenic Prime Minister. This landslide has been predicated on the smallest share of the vote probably ever for a government with a majority. Why isn't there the same enthusiasm for Starmer?
I think in major part because the country is punch drunk after the chaos and division of the last 14 years of the Conservatives. The lies, the deceiving, the economic chaos, constant change and no sense of purpose and direction. And yes, that's about the last Conservative government, but that infects people's attitudes towards all parties. And I think that's why, and I've said it previously on your programme, I think this is probably the first government elected with a landslide without enthusiasm. But I think there is the prospect of delivering real, measurable change that will begin to reconnect with people. And as I said earlier, if you look at the early steps of this Labour government over the last 3 to 4 days, they very much have hit the ground running. And it will be about delivery. It will be about demonstrating that we can reform the planning system, that we can build the houses that are needed, that we can generate the economic growth to enable us to invest more in public services. And I think as that happens, you'll begin to see greater support moving forward.
Bill, do you not worry when you hear Tony Blair talking in that way? And I would also say Rishi Sunak before him, about AI being the solution to all of our problems. Do you never wonder about the question, what are people going to do for jobs? Because AI, inevitably, a lot of this tech changes and we have to move with the times. We cannot be complete Luddites when it comes to technology. We have to accept some of it. But it really worries me when I hear Tony Blair speaking in a sort of utopian megalomania way that this is going to save us all. We never hear, and the jobs people are going to do are X.
I think there's a modicum of truth in that, Bev. I mean,
a lot.
Hold on. Technology can help us to get greater productivity within the public sector, and that is welcome. But we also need to be interventionist to actually protect, for want of a better phrase, some of the worst excesses of AI and technology, and particularly to work out and protect where the jobs of the future are coming from. And if you want to contrast between this Labour government led by Keir Starmer and the last Labour government led by Tony Blair. This is a government that's going to be much more interventionist in the jobs market, in industry. You know, one of the big things that's been happening over the last few days is the negotiations with Tata Steel, the state intervening to support and maintain British jobs.
Well, hang on, Bill. I think the Tory,
under the last Labour government.
No, I think the last Tory government was talking to Tata about intervening. I think they're just carrying on where the Tories left off.
We're doing it much more effectively, and we're going to deliver a result over the next few weeks that will protect thousands of jobs in Wales and elsewhere within the UK. But I'm making a broader point that, you know, you need a government that meets the challenges of the age that you're living in. And I think this Labour government, led by Keir Starmer, is going to be much more interventionist than when Tony Blair was Prime Minister.
All
I
right,
think that's
Bill.
a good thing.
OK, thank you. We really appreciate your time this morning. Loads of you getting in touch. You're incensed by Tony Blair bursting onto the stage this morning. We'll get to some of those messages.
The man who's caused all the problems with migration in this country.
Don't go anywhere.
Here is the weather with Alex.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some places having some fine weather today, but for most of us, expect rain. Could be quite heavy, and for many it's going to be a cool day as well. Already raining across much of northern England, North Wales, that rain spreading into Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland. Further south, the rain is more on and off, with parts of the Midlands largely dry through this morning. Some heavy showers possible across the far southeast of England, and actually northwest Scotland generally staying fine through the day. Some good spells of sunshine here. If it brightens up later over northern England and parts of the Midlands, feeling quite warm and humid, it may spark some heavy and thundery showers. But for much of the day, southern and central Scotland's going to be wet, and that rain is drifting up into northeastern Scotland. And once it arrives here, it's going to last through the night and indeed for most of tomorrow as well. But for most of today, at least, the Highlands and the Western Isles and the Northern Isles of Scotland dry and bright. Most of Northern Ireland, though, dull and soggy. That rain will be heavy in places here too. Brightening up over northern England and the Midlands this afternoon. Quite warm and humid here, but that could spark some thundery showers. Quite a lot of cloud across the south with some showers here. But the heaviest rain further north in this band, and as I said, once it sets in over particularly northeast Scotland, likely to last through the night and for much of tomorrow as well. Still some heavy showers this evening over northern England, and we'll see more showers coming in through the night across parts of the south, staying fairly wet too for much of Northern Ireland. Quite a warm night with temperatures in towns and cities holding up at 14 or 15. The rain persisting over parts of northern Scotland. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. That rain could cause some disruption. A different day over northwest Scotland with outbreaks of rain here. Slowly further south, we'll see something a bit brighter, some good spells of sunshine, but still a potential for one or two showers, staying fairly cloudy with some showery rain for Northern Ireland and northwest England. Some brightness in the south, seeing temperatures in the 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
On the M8 in Edinburgh, the inside lane's closed westbound, where a lorry has a puncture between junctions 2 and 3 from the M9 to Livingston, causing queues. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed westbound after an accident between junctions 33 and 32A towards the A1M, and it's slow towards there. The Mersey Ferry remains suspended because of a technical problem. On the M40 in Oxfordshire, there's a lane closed southbound after a vehicle caught fire earlier between junctions 11 and 10 from Banbury to Brackley. It's been taking around half an hour in delays towards and past there. And in Surrey, there are 3 sections of the A24 closed northbound where they've been dealing with an oil spill that the lorry's left as it's proceeded along the A24. It's closed northbound from the Bear Green roundabout to Chart Lane South at Dorking, from the Reigate Road roundabout at Dorking to the Burford Bridge roundabout at West Humble, and also from the Givens Grove roundabout to the Beaverbrook roundabout at Leatherhead. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Summer could be a scorcher, with your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date. It's totally tax-free, which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday the 9th of July, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So a big rise in defence spending or not as Russia bombs a children's hospital in Ukraine on the eve of the NATO summit. The former head of the British Army calls for more money for our military, warning we're only fit to fight for a month.
And we've just been subjected to Tony Blair's vision. Former Prime Minister has urged the new Labour government to embrace artificial intelligence as a game changer in fuelling economic growth. Of course he did.
And there's a row over the new Women's Minister. Not surprising, the Prime Minister's appointed Annalise Dodds to the role. Feminist campaigners are furious because this is what she said, Annalise Dodds, to the BBC just 2 years ago.
Labour's definition of a woman?
Well, I have to say that there are different definitions legally around what a woman actually is.
Statistics on smoking-related cancers, which have reached a record high, with 160 people being diagnosed every day. This is despite a fall in smoking rates.
And before midday, we're going to dip into the popular Conservatism post-election conference. Speakers include Jacob Rees-Mogg, Lord Frost, Suella Braverman. We'll keep an eye out for Liz Truss after she lost her seat at the general election, as did, of course, Jacob.
David Davis is with us.
We are. So we're going to talk to him about Tony Blair, we're going to talk to him about the army, the strength, and also what the Tories should do after their worst defeat ever.
And I'll be Googling an island to go and live on while Tony Blair is in charge. gbnews.com/your say to let us know your thoughts this morning. Give me your island ideas. First, though, the very latest news with Mark White.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. Labour ministers will sit on the government front benches for the first time in 14 years when Parliament returns this afternoon. 643 MPs will gather to elect a Speaker, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle expected to put himself forward once again. They'll also swear an oath ahead of Parliament's state opening next Wednesday. And Sir Keir Starmer will speak for the first time at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. Tonight, the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Sir Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Labour leader has already pledged his unshakable support for the alliance. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between both Britain and America. Well, the summit comes as world leaders condemn Russia's missile attack on the main children's hospital in Kyiv. Well, these are live pictures at the scene of that strike as rescuers continue to sift through the rubble. Ukraine's President Zelensky says 37 people, including 3 children, are now confirmed to have died. More than 170 others were injured when the missiles struck in broad daylight on Monday. Pay negotiations are set to get underway between England's junior doctors and the new government. Representatives from the British Medical Association will meet Department of Health officials to try to end the long-running dispute. 11 strikes over 20 months have caused widespread disruption to millions of appointments. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has previously said he would not agree to demands for a 35% pay rise. The Prime Minister said the government will set up a council for regions and nations during a meeting with mayors in Downing Street. Well, a warning for those watching on TV, the following footage contains some flash photography. Greater Manchester's Andy Burnham and Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, were among those who attended this morning. Sir Keir said he's planning to loosen Whitehall's tight grip over big cities and regions through a new partnership approach. It follows warnings by the Local Government Association of a £6 billion funding gap in the local authority sector. Conservative Mayor for the Tees Valley, Ben Houchin, told GB News the meeting went well.
It was very positive, actually. I was really pleasantly surprised that he was really energetic, really keen. He wanted to work with us, and he was very open to the idea of much more devolution, which has changed with different prime ministers over the last 10 or 15 years, depending on which one it is. So ultimately, we're going to have to keep him to his word. If he keeps his promises, then it looks very promising for further devolution, and ultimately, it looks very promising that we can get on and deliver for our regions.
Suella Braverman is blaming Liberal Conservatives for the Tories' election defeat. Speaking at the National Conservatism Conference in Washington, the former Home Secretary said the party had taken a good hiding and lost more than 250 seats because they failed to keep their promises. Ms Braverman is among the likely candidates to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservatives. Conditions at Harmondsworth Immigration Removal Centre have been branded the worst in the country by the prisons inspector. According to the report, violence and drug use were rife at the site in February. The inspection also revealed several serious suicide attempts. Mighty Car and Custody, which runs the centre, said that they would work tirelessly to implement the report's recommendations as soon as reasonably practicable. Thames Water says it will run out of money by the end of next May unless it can get further funding. Britain's biggest water firm, which is in debt by more than £15 billion, has just £1.8 billion in cash reserves that it needs new funding to maintain and update its infrastructure after investors pulled the plug on £500 million of emergency cash earlier this year. It could leave the new Labour government with a difficult decision over whether to nationalise it, something they've said they will not do. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Mark White. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. I'm delighted in the studio with us is the senior Tory MP who's still standing, like a lot of your colleagues. David Davis, congratulations. You are one of only 120. David, you're almost part of an extinct species.
Not quite.
It was pretty grim, and it was a terrible campaign.
Yeah. It was a terrible campaign. I mean, Central Office did a bad operation. They just were very poor. And, of course, we were... I mean, the communist comment on the doorstep was, you know, when you get your act together, we'll vote for you. I mean, it's all to do with disunity. And
we want to talk to you about Blair and stuff, but just before we do, I want to ask you, there is a growing view, and I was in the House for a bit yesterday, it's too soon to rush into a leadership contest. Nobody really knows who these candidates are. You've got a lot of new MPs. Why not have a caretaker Tory leader? somebody senior, somebody who's perhaps been a cabinet minister, David. I'm looking intently at you.
Yeah, I know. I
and
can
maybe
see that coming.
hold the fort until December, because I was at Tom Tugendhat's do last night. He's a minister, he's going to run for the leadership. Sure, said nobody wants to hear from you. Just go and lie under a stone.
I agree with the argument of delay, and the reason is very simple. Opposition is incredibly different from government. What we need is somebody who is brilliant at opposition, right? Because no matter how grievous this defeat is, this huge Labour majority is incredibly fragile.
Yeah.
Loads and loads of people with majorities in the hundreds, Labour members.
Yeah.
Majority. So we could, if we did it properly, sweep back. And so the two options. One is end up like William Hague, brilliant speaker, but completely defeated by circumstance.
Yeah.
One extra seat at the end of it. Or we could get our act together properly, do the selection of the leader properly, and maybe defeat Labour next time round. Now, to do that, you've got to pick somebody who's good at opposition. We don't know whether any of them are good at opposition or which ones are. So give them a few months and hold the thing after December. I have to say, I think it's Rishi Sunak's duty to stay on, deal with some of the obvious problems in central office, some of the obvious problems on finance, the other issues that you don't want to distract a new leader, and give the party time to make a measured and sensible assessment. There's nothing special about doing it now. Christmas is easily early enough.
Yeah, I agree. And after the debacle of the election campaign, his campaign, he should own that, and going early, his mistake. Yeah. He will do the right thing, won't he?
Oh, I think he will. I mean, look, he's a very honourable man. But, understand, if you're standing at the dispatch box as the leader of the opposition and you ask a question, something wrong with this hospital or wrong with that transport system, it's your fault. That's all Starmer has to say. We are cleaning up your mess. Right. And that will be true for the first 2 years. So there's no rush. In fact, there's a very, very big premium in giving the party a bit of time and not putting in a new leader until we've got through that first grim 6 months.
I agree.
How did you feel seeing Sir Tony Blair standing up there today, telling us his vision for this country?
It was wonderful. It was just wonderful. Look, 6 months ago, people who actually understand AI were warning us about it. The experts, the people who design the systems, right? Then we have Tony Blair, who did admit when he was Prime Minister that he had struggled with his O-level science, right? Yeah. Telling us that we should embrace AI and that somehow is the answer to everything. So it's nonsense. I mean, but what's also interesting about this is the fact that he's come out so quickly. Instantly, we've got a new Labour government. Actually, in every sense of the phrase, a new Labour government. It's a Blairite government.
Isn't it? Because we know all the policy documents he wrote for Starmer beforehand. Big article in the Sunday Times on Sunday about what he's got to do on migration. He caused all the migration problems, by the way.
Or at least to be a little bit more subtle.
Yeah, not very
He's
subtle.
shown his hand so quickly.
He has shown his
so
hand
many
so quickly.
people have been waiting for him to know what's going on.
I think he's got overexcited.
He did.
But the similarities are astonishing. I mean, there's a PhD to be written about this. Gordon Brown was the one who encouraged extra immigration. Why? Because it made the growth numbers look better. Not the growth per capita, not the wealth of individuals, but the growth numbers look better. He did that deliberately, right? All of the other things he did deliberately. He fiddled the books bluntly. He came in and said, now we've seen the books, now we've seen the, quote, secret books. There are no secret books. Quite. All these things are coming down the road. PFI, this horrible...
Private Finance Initiative.
Which is government on the never-never. Brown did that to take all this money off the national debt. He did that, and for 50 billion of resources, we paid 275 billion taxpayers' money.
And we're still paying for it.
And we're still paying for it, and we'll pay for it again because Reeves has said she's going to do the same. So all of the things you saw in the first Blair government, you're going to get in the second Blair government, which is what this is.
What did you think about Tony Blair, even on Sunday, barely sort of 48 hours after the election from Friday morning, writing about his ambitions for digital ID system in this country? What did you think? Civil liberties sit very much at the heart of your position.
I defeated his ID card idea before. No, actually, it's not true. I didn't defeat it. He defeated it. I don't know if you remember. They wanted an ID card. 80% of the public agreed with this. And then one day, the government lost 2 CDs with everybody's records.
Yes.
Do you remember that? And all of a sudden it went from 80% in favour to 70% against. I wish it was me. It was actually them. And that will happen again. You know, he wants all the health records in one place.
Yeah. Crazy.
And then they'll get leaked. You know,
yeah.
And all our most intimate details.
Yeah.
So he is. Let me put it this way: his comments are more inspirational than practical. Yeah.
He'd like them to be practical, though.
He'd like them to be practical.
Bill Rammell was saying then, because I made this accusation that I think he has conflicts of interest financially, Tony Blair, in a lot of what he's saying.
Of course he
And
has.
Bill said, you know, he's probably just as rich as John Major. Well, John Major's worth 20 million quid. Tony Blair is... it says he's worth 60 million. I think it's a lot more than that.
I think that's the takings for 1 month, actually.
Yeah.
It must be. His net worth
he's worked
is
for every
enormous.
dodgy despot in the world, hasn't he? And he's
Of course he has.
Oh, he's the Middle East, Far East,
property empire.
probably China, I don't know about
Are you a little frightened?
No. I mean, I think, look, the story I told you about ID cards, this will happen time and again. Things will go wrong, you know, and the public will see. We've had a rehearsal of this. We've seen it before. So at least this time, hopefully, we'll be a little bit more prepared for it. But, you know, everything's on a teeter-totter. You know, in 5 years' time, we could have a desperately oppressive, not in the Eastern European sense, but an oppressive government in the sense of intrusive government. Too big, taxes too high, too much interference in everybody's life and so on. You could have that, or you could have a collapsed Labour government and a Tory government coming instead.
That's what I think.
Really, that's the range of options.
Yeah.
You know, and it is that huge this time.
Let's just ask you one final question, Dave, because of pressure of time. Starmer's off to the NATO summit. We saw what happened in Kiev with the bombing of the children's hospital. Not a coincidence, done in daylight. They knew exactly what they were doing. Should the former head of the British Army saying we could only fight a war for a month, if that, the Tories were going to raise spending to 2.5% of GDP immediately. Labour said they will when they can afford it. They've got to do it immediately.
Yeah, they have, and 2.5 is not enough either.
No, it should be 3%, shouldn't it?
But so it should be 3% across NATO, because it's all of NATO that's under threat on the first hand. But the other side of this is this, and I'm afraid the head of the army, the ex-head of the army, has got some responsibility here. We've got to learn to spend our money better.
Yes.
We waste money in defence in this country like it's going out of fashion. We've got to build our reserves. I mean, actually, we could build 100,000 reserves quite quickly if we wanted to, and they're just as good as regular soldiers.
Because you go every weekend or every second weekend.
All of that. You learn the tricks, you know, you learn the games, you learn the tactics, you learn the skills, but also you bring to them, you know, if you're a software specialist or you're a doctor, you bring your civilian skills into it too. So you have a much cleverer army too. Clever, not in the sense of IQ, but...
And they're committed.
Yeah,
because
and of course they're volunteers by definition, not doing it because they can't get another job, you know. So I think, and all this talk, you had talk in the past about conscription, that's never going to happen. It'll always be too late anyway. But what could happen is a much, much bigger reserve army and much smarter use of money. Fewer big expensive tanks, lots more cheap drones, that sort of thing. A rethink, a complete rethink is what's needed.
Well, David, we are delighted that you're still there talking some sense.
Yes, thank God you won.
Thank goodness. Thank you, David
Pleasure.
Davis. Right, up next, can Britain become a clean energy superpower under Labour? Word salad. Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband thinks so. We're trying to work out, do you have any idea, Andrew, what a clean energy superpower is?
It's when he creates GB Energy, this new company they're going to create, which they say will cost $8 billion. Add a naught.
Yeah, it might make you poorer. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Khloe Kardashian has come under fire after posting a picture of her 6-year-old daughter wearing a full face of makeup.
Yeah, the reality TV star said the youngster was participating in a dance recital and that wasn't an everyday occurrence.
So this morning we're asking, is it ever OK to let children wear makeup?
Well, joining us now is journalist Julie Cook. So, Julie, it's a child wearing full rouge, bright red lipstick, hair tied back, looking very, very stylised, very much, I think, like a young adult. Is this really the sort of thing we should be doing with small children?
Oh, I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, first of all, in Khloe Kardashian's case, it was a dance recital, so it was very much a kind of performance element to it. She said herself in her post, it wasn't something they do every day. She was taking part in a dance activity. So, you know, I think she's vindicated on that front. But I've let my daughter play with makeup since she was 3. When she was 3, she showed a distinct interest in my makeup palettes, going through my stuff. She's 10 now, and while I don't let her wear a full face like a drag queen, I do let her wear, you know, a bit of mascara on a weekend if she wants to. I don't see any harm in it.
Clearly, if you're a child of a Kardashian who's paid millions of dollars to endorse cosmetics, you know, that's part of the fabric of their family. My concern, though, Julie, is putting those pictures on social media where people can see them. We live in an age now where, you know, wrong-uns are scouring the internet all the time.
A lot of girls do enjoy putting makeup on. It's almost like a self-expression thing. It's like painting on a canvas. They're just trying to be a bit artistic. I don't think it's necessarily as sort of sinister as we're making out. And I think as long as you're not posting pictures everywhere or putting them at risk of harm, I don't see any danger.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained. I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Andrew Pearson, but we've got our panel here. Who have we got?
Sam Fowles and Piers Pottinger are with us. Gentlemen, good to see you.
Let's talk to Piers first about the Tories. You've been known the Tories for years and years and years, Piers. I was saying to David Davis, delay it. They don't need a Tory leader till, he says, December. Not a bad idea. Get a caretaker, maybe, unless they keep Rishi in the job, or have a caretaker, somebody like David Davis, an elder statesman, and then the Tories can get themselves organised.
Yes, I mean, David...
Nobody's ready for them.
I think David would be a superb chairman of the party. But it's right, because the problem is with the existing bunch, those that are left, none of them have been in opposition before.
No, absolutely.
And being in opposition is a different skill to being on the government benches. And we've got to find that it needs to emerge. And it's a question of who is going to be good at the dispatch box, who's going to capture the imagination of the voters, and also who's going to stand up to the obvious Mr. Charisma, Nigel Farage, in the House. Because if they don't find someone good, Farage will be the person who will ineffectively be the voice of the opposition.
That's why they should take their time.
And in a way, it needs to be somebody that hasn't been entirely on side with Rishi Sunak, because as David Davis says, when Keir Starmer stands up and says, but it's all your fault, somebody like Suella Braverman would probably go, yes, I agree, but I would do it differently.
Yes,
that's the only possibility.
Personally, I think they need a fresh face somehow. And I think, you know, the word at the moment very strongly is Robert Jenrick.
Former immigration minister.
And, I mean, he was a disastrous immigration minister. And also he's written, in my view, an appalling piece in The Telegraph today about prisons, which, again, when he was in the Home Office, you could say, well, that's your fault, mate, too. And, of course, that's what the government will do the whole time now. It's your fault, and they're already doing it. I mean, of course, it's an absolute nonsense, Rachel Reeves saying, well, I only discovered yesterday how bad it was.
That's not true.
She's known for months how bad it was. And they're just paving the way to put up horrifically taxes and hit the middle classes in England in the most terrible way.
OK, well, Sam, let's move on. We've got a lot of time to decide on who might be the next leader of the Conservatives, hopefully.
Can I do
it? You can do it, Sam.
Yeah, OK.
Keir Starmer sparked a row this week because he's appointed the Women's Minister as Annalise Dodds. I think we've got the audio of Annalise Dodds being asked what a woman is. Here you go, listen to this.
Labour's definition of a woman?
Well, I have to say that there are different definitions legally around what a woman actually is. I mean, you look at the definition within the Equality Act, and I think it just says someone who is adult and female, I think, but then doesn't say how you define either of those things. I mean, obviously, that's then you've got the biological definition, legal definition.
With respect, I didn't ask for that. What's the Labour definition?
Well, I think with respect, Emma, I think it does depend what the context is, surely.
Oh, here we go again. She's the Equalities Minister, Sam. That's brilliant. She can't define a woman.
I just think this is such a ridiculous story, and it's a gotcha question, because the reality is, for the past God knows how many centuries, we've defined a woman based on
Since
self.
Adam and Eve, actually. Yeah. Since Adam and Eve, thousands of years.
Yeah, but that's always been based on self-identification or perception. So does someone present as a woman? You know, does someone present as a man? You guys all assume that I'm a man, but that's based on how I'm presenting to you. You haven't asked me to, you know, drop my trousers and prove it. You haven't asked me to provide you any papers.
Not likely to.
No, well, good, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think it's just, there's this ridiculous sort of gotcha question of define what a woman is.
It's a basic question for the Equalities Minister. What's a woman?
Well, a woman is...
That doesn't seem to say it depends on the context.
Well, but it does depend on the context, doesn't it?
But you are born male.
I am, so far as I'm saying.
So even if you presented to me as more feminine, if you had a dress on this morning and you've been sat in makeup, you would still be a man.
But you wouldn't know, is what I'm saying. I could be a woman right now. I could have women's parts and I could just be wearing a chest binder.
I want to live in a world that believes in truth.
Yeah.
That's the most important issue that underpins everything.
Can I just say on this, Tony Blair, he was telling Keir Starmer what to do today in his speech for the Tony Blair Institute. On Sunday, in the Sunday Times, he was also telling Keir Starmer what to do on immigration, but he also said, don't get caught up in all this wokery. This is exactly what Sam's talking about and what the new Equalities Minister's talking about.
Yes, of course, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, if you can't define the word woman, why is she a woman's minister?
Yeah.
What does that mean? She doesn't know. I mean, it's ridiculous. And we're only arguing about this because of a small minority in this country, and it's a tiny minority.
Less than 1%.
Who are unsure about their sexuality. The fact is, there are men and women, full stop. And we ought to just be bold enough and strong enough to admit that. If people want to pretend they're someone else, fine, good luck to them. I've got no problem with that. But the fact is a man is a man and a woman is a woman. Full stop.
Actually,
there's no question about it.
We're not arguing about this because of trans people. We're arguing about this because a very small minority decided that persecuting trans people was good politics.
Who?
No, we're deciding this because a very small but very noisy group of trans activists decided to attack people like me when I was booked to talk at a legal firm on International Women's Day. This is 10 years ago. And I was told I couldn't stand because I'd once liked a tweet of an article in the Daily Mail written by Graham Linehan. That's where this started.
I don't think that is where this started, though.
It did, Sam.
It started with people like Graham Linehan.
To cancel J.K. Rowling. This minority.
Who's cancelling J.K. Rowling? She's going to have 10 billion instead of 25 billion.
She's been banned from speaking at universities by this lobby.
She's been asked not to speak at... She's not been invited to speak at universities. Well, why is it cancellation that you say there's better people to speak at a university than J.K. Rowling? I can think of about 1,000 people that are better to speak at a university than a billionaire that spends all her life on Twitter. I mean, what's she got to add?
Denigrate a woman who's got millions of people into reading books, kids. I mean, you're denigrating her as a billionaire. What's wrong if she's a billionaire? She's a billionaire because her books are so successful and they're good.
Yeah, and she could have used she's a billionaire that could have used all of that power and all of that influence to help people. She chooses to spend her time on Twitter attacking a tiny, vulnerable minority.
She's not attacking the minority. In fact, quite the reverse. It's the minority who are cancelling her and preventing her from speaking. I believe in freedom of speech. You clearly don't. I mean, I think it is absolutely absurd that this tiny minority of ludicrous activists have created an issue that never existed before. They've created it themselves because they're attention seekers more than anything else. And it is a waste of time and money for us even to be discussing it.
But if you believe in freedom of speech, will you condemn water Waterstones, who have fired an employee who criticised a writer who attacks trans people. It's subsequently turned out that writer has a history of tweeting things that, it's certainly in my view, are racist. For using her freedom of speech to defend trans people, the Waterstones fired her. Will you speak out for me, who, for using my freedom of speech to defend trans people, has been attacked repeatedly by the anti-trans lobby? You know, this is not a one-way street.
See, I don't believe there is an anti-trans lobby.
There's definitely an anti-trans lobby.
Not in the same way that there is the trans activist lobby. There are those who are pro-women, I would say, as opposed to pro-women's spaces, women's rights, women's identity, biologically born women. Those people, and I put myself in this category, do not wish any harm on any individual that wants to live a life that is opposite to the gender in which they were born. We don't wish them any harm. Whereas the trans activists wish biological women harm and have actually attacked women at protests.
Well, let's talk about these pro-women campaigners. Graham Linehan speaking at a conference in Ireland on the same platform as anti-abortion campaigners. Let's talk about the pro-women protesters who harassed a cis woman who won a 10K just because she looked a bit mannish. Let's talk about the ones that attacked a woman in a women's toilet because she had a pixie cut and they thought she was too mannish. She didn't conform to the sort of 1950s style of woman.
Get back to the point. The Equalities Minister cannot define a woman.
The Equalities Minister can define a woman, actually. She's aware of the legal definition. She's aware of the biological definition.
Sam, don't you think this whole horrible, divisive issue would be really simply solved if someone like Annalise Dodd said, yes, a woman, a biological born woman is a woman, and there is also trans women.
Yeah.
That is it. Simple. Distinguish between the two. Because I will distinguish between you as a man, and if there was a man sat next to you who dressed as female, that would be, for me, no, other way around.
Yeah,
the other way around. If it was a woman, that would be a trans man.
Well, but I don't think...
And that's OK.
With the exception of a very small group of conditions, for example, if you're putting someone in a cell with them, then that would be part of the part of your assessment, your risk assessment. That you do for all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But with the exception of that, this is a really arbitrary and unnecessary definition.
Let's quickly get, before we go to the news, the gentleman on Blair. Did you think about Tony Blair? Pretty difficult for Starmer, isn't it? Sunday, a huge article from Blair. Yeah. Tuesday, there he is again. It's beginning to look like he's not pulling his strings from the back, pulling from the front.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, the great Mandelson is very involved, too. In fact, one of his company, Global Counsel, they are paying for a special advisor to Rachel Reeves.
Interesting.
And it's, I wonder about the ethics of having a paid special advisor to the Chancellor of the Exchequer from a lobbying firm. I find that
because
really...
you ran a lobbying firm for years.
If that happened, if a Conservative did that, there'd be uproar. But Mandelson's got away with it because of his cosy nature with Starmer. Yeah, Mandelson and Blair are pulling the strings of Starmer. It's quite clear. And horrific.
It does look unfortunate, doesn't it? The big article on Sunday, knowing he's doing the conference on Tuesday, which would, of course, Sam, been organised months ago. It's a bad look.
Yeah, I mean, he's trailing his conference, isn't he? He wants people to come to it. I am going to agree with Piers, though. I think it is absolutely wrong for private companies to be paying for SPADs. Yeah. That's a real problem, and if that's happening early on in Starmer's administration, then that's something he needs to get right and get it right immediately, because you can't have that.
OK, gentlemen, thank you so much. We've run out of time, but you will be back in the next hour. First, though, the very latest news headlines with our very own Mark White.
It's 10:32. The main news headlines from the GB News Centre. Labour ministers will sit on the government front benches for the first time in 14 years when Parliament returns this afternoon. 643 MPs will gather to elect a Speaker, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle expected to put himself forward once again. They'll also swear an oath ahead of Parliament's state opening next Wednesday. And Sir Keir Starmer will speak for the first time at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. The new cabinet is meeting this morning for the second time in just 3 days. Ministers arrived in Downing Street to discuss Sir Keir Starmer's key priorities for his first 100 days in office. At the heart of that agenda, moves to radically boost economic growth, build hundreds of thousands of new homes and tackle illegal immigration. Well, tonight the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Sir Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between Britain and America. Pay negotiations are set to get underway between England's junior doctors and the new government. Representatives from the British Medical Association will meet Department of Health officials to try to end the long-running dispute. 11 strikes over 20 months have caused widespread disruption to millions of appointments. The Prime Minister said that the government will set up a council for regions and nations during a meeting with mayors in Downing Street. A warning for those watching on TV: the following footage contains some flash photography. Well, Greater Manchester's Andy Burnham and Mayor of London Sadiq Khan were among those who attended this morning. Sir Keir said he's planning to loosen Whitehall's tight grip over big cities and regions through a new partnership approach. It follows warnings by the Local Governments Association of a £6 billion funding gap in the local authority sector. Thames Water says it will run out of money by the end of next May unless it can get further funding. Britain's biggest water firm, which is in debt by more than £15 billion, has just £1.8 billion in cash reserves. It needs new funds to maintain and update its infrastructure after investors pulled the plug on £500 million of emergency cash earlier this year. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
10:35, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Now, cancer cases caused by smoking are at an all-time high, according to Cancer Research UK. We're going to bring you more on that next, so time for a quick break.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some places having some fine weather today, but for most of us, expect rain. Could be quite heavy, and for many it's going to be a cool day as well. Already raining across much of northern England, North Wales, that rain spreading into Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland. Further south, the rain is more on and off, with parts of the Midlands largely dry through this morning. Some heavy showers possible across the far southeast of England, and actually northwest Scotland generally staying fine through the day. Some good spells of sunshine here. If it brightens up later over northern England and parts of the Midlands, feeling quite warm and humid, that may spark some heavy and thundery showers. But for much of the day, southern and central Scotland's going to be wet, and that rain is drifting up into northeastern Scotland. And once it arrives here, it's going to last through the night and indeed for most of tomorrow as well. But for most of today, at least, the Highlands and the Western Isles and the Northern Isles of Scotland dry and bright. Most of Northern Ireland, though, dull and soggy. That rain will be heavy in places here too. Brightening up over northern England and the Midlands this afternoon. Quite warm and humid here, but that could spark some thundery showers. Quite a lot of cloud across the south with some showers here. But the heaviest rain further north in this band, and as I said, once it sets in over particularly northeast Scotland, likely to last through the night and for much of tomorrow as well. Still some heavy showers this evening over northern England, and we'll see more showers coming in through the night across parts of the south, staying fairly wet too for much of Northern Ireland. Quite a warm night with temperatures in towns and cities holding up at 14 or 15. The rain persisting over parts of northern Scotland. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. That rain could cause some disruption. A different day over northwest Scotland with outbreaks of rain here. Slowly further south we'll see something a bit brighter, some good spells of sunshine, but still a potential for one or two showers, staying fairly cloudy with some showery rain for Northern Ireland and northwest England. Some brightness in the south, seeing temperatures in the 20s.
the latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M40 in Oxfordshire, there's a lane closed southbound after a vehicle caught fire earlier between junctions 11 and 10 from Banbury to Brackley. It's taking roughly 20 minutes in the queues. On the M1 in Bedfordshire, there are northbound queues towards junction 11, the A505 Luton and Dunstable turn after traffic was stopped because of an accident. On the M26 in Kent, there are westbound queues approaching the M25 because of roadworks. The M25 very busy clockwise towards and past there too. Now, in Surrey, the A24 is closed northbound from the Bear Green roundabout to Chart Lane South at Dorking, then from the Reigate Road roundabout at Dorking to the Burford Bridge roundabout at West Humble, and then between the Givens Grove and Beaverbrook roundabouts at Leatherhead because of an oil spill. And on the M3 in Surrey, there are northbound queues after traffic was stopped because of an accident between junctions 3 and 2 from Bagshot to the M25. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It is 10:38. This is Britain's Newsroom.
Cancer cases caused by smoking are at an all-time high, according to Cancer Research UK.
Analysis suggests that 160 people are being diagnosed per day. That's nearly £58,000 a year.
Yeah, it's a time, isn't it, when we're supposedly smoking less. Now, the charity are calling on the new government to revive Rishi Sunak's legislation to phase out smoking, which would ban young people from ever being able to legally smoke. Well, joining us now is Head of Public Affairs and Campaigning at Cancer Research UK, Sean Walsh.
And Simon Clark is the director of Forest, an organisation that represents adults who choose to smoke tobacco. But we're just trying to bring Simon up, so this is Sean. Good morning, Sean. It does seem strange, doesn't it, when we've got less smoking, that actually lung cancers are going up?
Yes, it does seem a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? But the point is that there are still 6.4 million people in the UK who continue to smoke. And smoking, as we know, is the leading preventable cause of cancer. And what we're seeing with these figures today from Cancer Research UK is actually the lag effect of people who were smoking 10, 15 years ago. And that is now manifesting, sadly, in smoking-related cancer. As you say, the number of cases caused by smoking increasing by 17% since 2003. I think the key thing behind the statistics is for every one of these people, it's a family member, it's a friend. And for us at Cancer Research UK, it's a cancer that could have been prevented. So as you say, we are calling on the new government to deliver against their manifesto commitment, which was to introduce legislation to progressively phase out smoking and provide support for those people who do smoke to help them quit.
Sean, look, I used to smoke, and I'm very glad I stopped 25 years ago, whatever it was, but I just don't understand.
Me too, Andrew.
But I don't understand how that proposal by Rishi Sunak was ever going to work. Effectively, they were going to ban people from a certain age from ever being able to buy cigarettes. But unless people have got an ID card when they're 23, how are they going to know, the retailer, whether they're entitled to buy the fags or not?
Well, that was one of the pieces that was being discussed when the legislation was first being put through Parliament.
Just remind people what the legislation was. Just remind people what it was.
So the purpose of the legislation was to increase the age of sale of cigarettes by a year every year. So effectively, if you were 15 now, you would never legally be able to buy cigarettes. Cancer Research UK supports the legislation. It's supported by medical practitioners. It's supported by the public. And importantly, when the bill was going through Parliament, it was also overwhelmingly supported by all parties. We know that tobacco and cigarettes is a killer. We know that it's a product that, if used properly, will kill the people who use it. And like you, Andrew, I smoked when I was younger. And we know that the majority of people who do start smoking smoke when they were young. So the more we can do to defer that moment so people don't get hooked and addicted, I found it incredible. I know about you. I found it so hard to give up smoking. I've got an 11-year-old son. I've got a 5-month-old baby. And I look at both of them and I just hope that they are never legally able to purchase tobacco, because I know the damage it does from my own family history to people's health. And when we look at an NHS that is struggling, to meet demand, we see the cost of smoking to the economy and to the NHS. Smoking costs about 1.9 billion every year to the NHS in England alone. Whatever your views on the current government, they are working with a challenge that the previous government had. How do you prevent people from getting ill in the first place? How do you reduce demand on GP services? How do you reduce demand on the NHS? How do you help people live longer lives? This is a key piece of legislation that would achieve that. And the statistics we published today from Cancer Research UK highlight how important that is.
OK, thank you, Sean. Head of Public Affairs and Campaigning, Cancer Research UK, Sean Walsh there. Let's talk now to Simon Clark, who is the Director of Forest, an organisation that represents adults who choose to smoke tobacco. Good morning, Simon. Your response there to what you heard from Sean, this idea that nobody should be allowed to smoke because it is so dangerous.
Yes, good morning. Well, I completely reject that. I think it's all about educating people about the health risks of smoking. And can I start by saying that I fully accept that there are serious health risks associated with smoking. I mean, there cannot be a sane adult. Indeed, I don't think there are many teenagers who are not well aware of the health risks of smoking. Likewise, I welcome any new research that educates people about those health risks. But this argument in this report suggesting that the number of cancers caused by smoking in the UK has reached an all-time high does strike me as a bit misleading. I mean, we heard from Sean that it shows a lag effect of people smoking 10 or 15 years ago. But the reality is that smoking in the UK peaked in the 1950s. That was when 80% of men smoked and 40% of women were smokers. And smoking rates are currently at their lowest ever recorded levels. So I do think we need to put that in perspective, especially when we're talking about introducing draconian legislation. Now, Cancer Research, like the entire tobacco control industry, wants to introduce this generational ban on the sale of tobacco, where you're going to raise the age of sale by 1 year every year. And within 10 years, we're going to have this ludicrous situation where a 30-year-old, for example, will be allowed to purchase tobacco, but a 29-year-old won't, and it'll continue year after year after that. And it's utterly crazy. I mean, what it's going to do is, apart from infantilizing young adults who should be allowed to make up their own minds, because once you're 18, you are legally an adult, and you can do all sorts of things at the age of 18. You can drive a car, you can join the army, you can possess a credit card, you can purchase alcohol. If you can do all those things, and of course you can vote, and the same politicians who want to introduce this policy also want to reduce the voting age to 16, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But the reality is, once you're 18, you're legally an adult, and you must be treated like an adult. And that means being allowed to make what some people might regard as the wrong decisions. But that's life, and that's all about living in a free society. The main thing is that we are educated about the health risks, but once you're 18, you must be allowed to make decisions for yourself.
Do you think that under this new Labour government, Simon, we might see a relaxing of these rules and the idea that maybe as an adult you can make your own decisions?
No, they like this legislation.
Or is it going to go the other way?
It's going to go the other way.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, I have to say, I don't think there's much difference between the Rishi Sunak government and the Keir Starmer government in terms of the nanny state. I mean, I do think the Rishi Sunak policy, when he announced it at the Tory conference last October, I mean, it was just a political gimmick. He was running out of ideas. He decided to pull a rabbit from the hat, and he thought, oh, this will be very popular. But clearly, it made absolutely no difference whatsoever to the Conservative government's popularity. I mean, we heard from Sean that the public's behind this policy. Well, again, it depends what question you ask in opinion polls. When we've carried out opinion polls through a reputable pollster, we find that actually about 2/3 of people think if you can, drive a car at 18 and purchase alcohol and do all these things, you should also be allowed to purchase tobacco. So it's not as easy as simply saying people are behind this. And I think when people realize what are the consequences of introducing a policy like this, for example, it's going to clearly boost and fuel the black market because it's not going to protect children. There is already a law in place banning the sale of tobacco to people under the age of 18. If you want to protect children, then crack down on anybody who is selling tobacco to people under the age of 18. Don't discriminate against young adults and infantilize young adults.
OK. All right, Simon, thank you. Simon Clark is the Director of Forest, an organisation that represents adults who choose
No,
to...
Labour are going to reintroduce that legislation. It's unworkable.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
It is unworkable.
Right.
Are you 29? You can't have any cigarettes then? Well, no, I'm 30, you say.
Honestly.
I say, prove it. You have to have your driving licence, ID card?
It's going to get much worse than that. Right, up next, can Labour finally end the constant junior doctor strikes? Health Secretary Wes Streeting is going to try. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we've got quite an extraordinary story to talk to you about now because a triple amputee war hero is launching a bid to become the first to sail across the Pacific Ocean non-stop, solo and unsupported.
Craig Wood was blown up as a teenager by the Taliban in Afghanistan, but now he's hoping to change the perception of disabled people and raise money for other limbless veterans like himself. And Craig joins us now. Morning.
So, Craig, you are extraordinary. You are planning to take up to 80 days to sail from La Paz in Mexico to Japan.
Yeah.
How many miles is that?
It'll be over 6,000.
Amazing.
Amazing. And it will take you how long?
The minimum it's going to take me is 60 days. It could be up to 80. Yeah.
And that's on your own. You've done plenty of this before, haven't you? You've done lots of solo sailing.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of solo sailing, but not as big as this. It is the world's biggest ocean, after all.
And why that particular route?
I wanted it to be a challenge, not just for me, but for anyone.
Right.
So any able-bodied person can look at this and go, wow, that is difficult.
Yeah.
And so that was the main drive. Then it's become a bigger thing than that now. Now I'm raising money for charity and I can truly inspire people to change their perception on what is possible for disabled people.
And if you don't mind, can we ask you what happened in 2009 in Afghanistan? What were the circumstances of your injury?
I was on a normal routine foot patrol. About 5 metres in front of me, a commando IED was triggered. And subsequently, I became a triple amputee. Both legs above the knee, left hand at the wrist, facial injuries, etc., etc.
The People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10:51. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Andrew, we're on the telly. New Health Secretary Wes Streeting will meet with junior doctors this afternoon in an effort to end strike action and discuss reform.
What's the better? They've already agreed it. So junior doctors are going to say their pay's been cut by more than a quarter over the last 15 years, and they're still putting up for demanding a 35% increase.
So can he end the strikes at least? Well, to explain all of the above, Charlie Peters is with us. What's going to happen, Charlie?
Well, Wes Streeting says that any union worth their salt would come knocking on the government's door if they did meet that 35% pay demand, so that's highly unlikely. That's not going to happen. Wes Streeting has said as much, and I think we've heard yesterday from Rachel Reeves about her claim that the public finances are the worst they've been since the Second World War. Some Tory critics saying, is that the case?
Financial crash in 2000.
Is that, well, possibly, but also, is that the case? All the information is in the public. We have the OBR, we have the parliamentary records. What do they know now that they didn't know last week? But there is this perspective being put out that this is is pretext being laid out for a more conservative approach to dealing with these strikes. We've had 11 in 20 months from junior doctors. The last one saw, which was just before the general election, only ended on the 2nd of July, 23,000 staff walked out, 62,000 appointments cancelled at least. And it comes as the NHS waiting list has almost doubled from the pre-COVID levels. Millions are waiting for appointments. Over 6 million are on a waiting list. This is a significant issue that they're dealing with. But should they meet that 35 pay demand? Well, earlier today, GB News' Anna Riley was in Hull and she asked the good people there what they thought.
It's all to do with pay. They're all greedy. They all just keep wanting more money. Where's the love in the world? I'm at hospital all the time. Do you know what I mean? The doctors are on strike. I'm sat there for 12, 13 hours.
I don't think they should go on strike because there's people in the hospital what need help and them getting told to wait 10, 15 hours. I think the doctors shouldn't go on strike. They get enough money as is.
To be honest, I heard that they had a big pay rise already, 35%. There comes a point where you think, well, are they being a little selfish?
Well, Professor Philip Banfield, who's the chair of the BMA Council, on the first day of this new Labour government on Friday, he issued a statement directed at Wes Streeting, the new Health Secretary, and the Labour government more widely, saying, we know that you're going to approach this as a journey, e.g. you're not going to meet those demands immediately, are you, as Wes Streeting has always said, as the Labour kind of government in waiting has always said. But we'll see what that journey will lead to. Is there going to be some bargaining that meets them halfway? What percentage is acceptable? And can they get a significant level to be met when Rachel Reeves says the public finances are in disaster?
They'll announce the deal within hours. But it's all stitched up beforehand.
Oh, I think that's unlikely. I really do.
How very cynical of you, Andrew Pearce. Right, still to come. Our very own political correspondent, Catherine Forster, has an amazing personal story. You do not want to miss this. It's Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel. Here's Alex with the very important weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some places having some fine weather today, but for most of us, expect rain. Could be quite heavy, and for many, it's going to be a cool day as well. Already raining across much of northern England, North Wales, that rain spreading into Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland. Further south, the rain is more on and off, with parts of the Midlands largely dry through this morning. Some heavy showers possible across the far southeast of England, and actually northwest Scotland generally staying fine through the day. Some good spells of sunshine here. If it brightens up later over northern England and parts of the Midlands, feeling quite warm and humid, it may spark some heavy and thundery showers. But for much of the day, southern and central Scotland's going to be wet, and that rain is drifting up into northeastern Scotland. And once it arrives here, it's going to last through the night and indeed for most of tomorrow as well. But for most of today, at least, the Highlands and the Western Isles and the Northern Isles of Scotland dry and bright. Most of Northern Ireland, though, dull and soggy. That rain will be heavy in places here too. Brightening up over northern England and the Midlands this afternoon. Quite warm and humid here, but that could spark some thundery showers. Quite a lot of cloud across the south with some showers here. But the heaviest rain further north in this band, and as I said, once it sets in over particularly northeast Scotland, likely to last through the night and for much of tomorrow as well. Still some heavy showers this evening over northern England, and we'll see more showers coming in through the night across parts of the south, staying fairly wet too for much of Northern Ireland. Quite a warm night with temperatures in towns and cities holding up at 14 or 15. The rain persisting over parts of northern Scotland. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. That rain could cause some disruption. A different day over northwest Scotland with outbreaks of rain here. Slowly further south, we'll see something a bit brighter, some good spells of sunshine, but still a potential for one or two showers, staying fairly cloudy with some showery rain for Northern Ireland and northwest England. Some brightness in the south, seeing temperatures in the 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in cash has to be won. It's our biggest cash prize so far, and it could be yours. Phil was a winner. Listen to what he says about winning the Great British Giveaway.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox. I just looked at my account and thought, oh my God, yeah, it's true, it's gone into my account. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 9th of July, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So we've been subjected this morning to Sir Tony Blair's vision for the country. The former Prime Minister urged the new Labour government to embrace artificial intelligence as a game changer in fuelling economic growth.
And Scottish MPs are arriving. The Prime Minister makes a surprise appearance outside number 10 for a group photo with those new Scottish Labour MPs.
And the Popular Conservatism post-election conference is underway in London. We'll bring you any highlights.
A small gathering, I imagine. And the Women's Minister row. The Prime Minister appoints Annalise Dodds to the role, leaving feminist campaigners furious. Not surprising. This is what this woman, who's now the Equalities Minister, said to the BBC 2 years ago.
Labour's definition of a woman?
Well, I have to say that there are different definitions legally around what a woman actually is.
He's got 410 MPs, Keir Starmer, or 415 maybe, can't remember, and he comes up with an Equalities Minister who can't define a woman. Mind you, he was struggling until Tony Blair told him what it was.
Are you frightened yet? Are you frightened yet? I am. Let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. A lot more to get through the next hour. First, though, the very latest news with Mark White.
Good morning. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Labour ministers will sit on the government front benches for the first time in 14 years when Parliament returns this afternoon. 643 MPs will gather to elect a Speaker, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle expected to put himself forward once again. They'll also swear an oath ahead of Parliament's state opening next Wednesday. And Sir Keir Starmer will speak for the first time at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. The new Cabinet has met this morning for the second time in just 3 days. Ministers assembled in Downing Street to discuss Sir Keir Starmer's key priorities for his first 100 days in office. At the heart of that agenda, moves to radically boost economic growth, build hundreds of thousands of new homes and tackle illegal immigration. Well, tonight the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Sir Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Labour leader has already pledged his unshakable support for the alliance. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between Britain and America. The summit comes as world leaders condemn Russia's missile attack on the main children's hospital in Kyiv. Well, these are live pictures at the scene of that strike as rescuers continue to sift through the rubble. Ukraine's President Zelensky says 37 people, including 3 children, are now confirmed to have died. More than 170 others were injured when the missile struck in broad daylight on Monday. Pay negotiations are set to get underway between England's junior doctors and the new government. Representatives from the British Medical Association will meet Department of Health officials to try to end the long-running dispute. 11 strikes over 20 months have caused widespread disruption to millions of appointments. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has previously said he would not agree to demands for a 35% pay rise. The Prime Minister said the government will set up a Council for Regions and Nations during a meeting with mayors in Downing Street. A warning for those watching on TV: the following footage contains some flash photography. Well, Greater Manchester's Andy Burnham and Mayor of London Sadiq Khan were among those attending this morning's meeting. Sir Keir said he's planning to loosen Whitehall's tight grip over big cities and regions through a new partnership approach. It follows warnings by the Local Government Association of a £6 billion funding gap in the local authority sector. Conservative Mayor of the Tees Valley, Ben Houchin, told GB News the meeting went well.
It was very positive, actually. I was really pleasantly surprised that he was really energetic, really keen. He wanted to work with us, and he was very open to the idea of much more devolution, which has changed with different prime ministers over the last 10 or 15 years, depending on which one it is. So ultimately, we're going to have to keep him to his word. If he keeps his promises, then it looks very promising for further devolution, and ultimately, it looks very promising that we can get on and deliver for our regions.
Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has arrived at Parliament for his first day in the Commons. He was alongside his party's 4 other new MPs, including Chairman Richard Tyson, former Tory party Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson. Mr Farage says he's setting his sights on the new government and claims it could be in trouble pretty quickly. Suella Braverman is blaming Liberal Conservatives for the Tories' election defeat. Speaking at the National Conservatism Conference in Washington, the former Home Secretary said the party had taken a good hiding and lost more than 250 seats because they failed to keep their promises. Ms Braverman is among the likely candidates to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservatives. Thames Water says it will run out of money by the end of next May unless it can get further funding. Britain's biggest water firm, which is in debt by more than £15 billion, has just £1.8 billion in cash reserves. It needs new funds to maintain and update its infrastructure after investors pulled the plug on £500 million of emergency cash earlier this year. It could leave the new Labour government with a difficult decision over whether to nationalise it, something they've said they will not do. Conditions at Harmondsworth Immigration Removal Centre has been branded the worst in the country by the prisons inspector. According to the report, violence and drug use were rife at the site in February. The inspection also revealed several serious suicide attempts. Mighty Care and Custody, which runs the centre, said they will work tirelessly to implement the report's recommendations. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Mark White. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. This is Britain's Newsroom. Thank you for joining us this morning, GB News, with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce. You've been getting in touch at home. I did say earlier I wanted an island to go and live on.
Canby Island? Isle of Wight? Isle of Man?
I'm aiming a little higher than that, Andrew.
Lundy Island?
Well, Mark has got in touch and has said apparently there's the Beverly Islands. Ever heard of the Beverly Islands?
No.
No, I haven't. Apparently they're an uninhabited Canadian Arctic Circle
Off you go,
group.
then. Off you go. You might be a bit lonely.
In an area called...
It's a long way for your mum and dad to go.
In an area called Nunavut. I'm so disappointed. You're so keen to see me go and live on an uninhabited island.
The staff are already packing. They're packing their bags.
Jules said,
Yeah. Jules is gone.
I'd rather have Tony Blair than Keir Starmer any day.
Well, we don't know what Starmer's like yet.
Stuart says, is it true that the Labour ministers will not talk to GB News? Well, no, I don't think that is true, no.
I talked to Darren James, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury yesterday, and I said, can I give you some advice, Minister? Shave. Your beard looks ridiculous. Scruffy. Looks scruffy.
Maybe, that's not going to endear them to come and talk on GB News.
No, he stopped and talked for about 3 minutes about his beard. He said, do you really think so? I said, Thatcher did not allow cabinet ministers with beards.
You're meant to be networking, Andrew.
Especially if they were women.
You're meant to be telling them how welcome they would be, and we don't mind if they come on with their scruffy beard or not.
Well, you heard me.
Hang on, sorry, we're loading the comments. Freya says, Labour's plan, divide and rule. Jackie said, do you not think the public should vote for the new Conservative leader? They have time to have an election for the leader that no one voted for in Sunak. But, of course, the Conservative Party members should vote for...
Yes. Well, of course, there are some MPs who have survived the blitzkrieg last week, if that's the right word, who are saying that members should be excluded. Brilliant idea. As if they trudge the streets, knocking on doors, trying to get people out to support their MPs last week. Of course they deserve a vote in the leadership conference.
I couldn't agree more. Valerie says Starmer and Biden can discuss what they have in common, such as being the puppets of previous leaders.
Blair.
Ouch. And I wonder if Andy Burnham sat in Keir's number 10 chair to try it for size when he's going to replace him in just a few months' time. Oh, Valerie, what do you know?
I don't think that's very likely.
It's not very likely.
If Keir Starmer fell under a bus, it would be Wes Streeting or Rachel Reeves.
We're not hoping for that.
No, absolutely not. I mean, yeah, theoretically.
But yes. But, you know, if he's gone in 4 years, 5 years, which he may well be, I honestly think that's quite likely. I do. Yeah. I don't think they're going to be there for more than a term. I can't lie. Maybe I'm just hopeful. Will Starmer ask Biden what a woman is, says Keith. Wayne said, making the Prime Minister look like a puppet just because Tony Blair gives a speech and his opinion is short-sighted. It's very sad, GB News. Bashing Labour and twisting things to make the party look bad will not change what the Tories have done to the country over the last 14 years.
I think Starmer should ask Biden, do you know who I am?
He wouldn't know who he is, would he?
That would have been the killer question, wouldn't it, in that interview?
And Wayne, on your point, because we like critical feedback here, I appreciate your criticism. We aren't bashing Labour and twisting things. We know how bad the last few years were, particularly in my opinion. I don't really think the 14 years was disastrous. I really don't. I think the last 4 years were disastrous. But actually, there has been a suspicion that this government is merely Keir Starmer in all but name, and Tony Blair is running the show. And to come out out the blocks on the Tuesday morning confirms that suspicion.
Yeah. Right. Now, last week, our very own GB News political correspondent, Catherine Forster, thought she'd be outside Downing Street following the highs and lows of the election results, but instead she found herself in her mother's worst nightmare after her two sons, Matthew and Andrew, were reported missing in Bali.
That's right. So Catherine endured, as she puts it, the worst day of her life before finally, after 40 hours of no sightings, the pair were located. Well, earlier, GB News Breakfast spoke to Catherine and her boys. Here's their story.
Fortunately, it was my idea.
And when did you realise this is not such a good idea?
Oh, quite early on. I think it was like maybe 2 hours in. We were like, should we turn back now? Yeah. And we decided to go up, and that was our last mistake, because then we went up the rest of the mountain, phones died, and got lost up there.
So this is a volcano in Bali, and instead of speaking to locals and taking the advice, which would have been hire a guide, make sure you've got expert advice getting up this mountain, you decided to use technology, which lots of people do, and use an app on your phone to help you navigate it. But what went wrong, Andrew?
I think it was just a complete lack of preparation, you know. Just went out there, no power banks, like, we were just completely unprepared and we hadn't done the research.
So your phone ran out of battery and you just didn't know the way down, literally that simple.
Once we were at the top, we were expecting to see like tour groups and stuff that we could
But nobody about.
No one,
Why was that? Do you know?
The top of the volcano, it was 3,000 metres up, so it was in the clouds.
Yeah.
And the terrain was so sheer, there was no way for us to go around the top to where the tour groups would have been.
Gotcha.
So when we got there, we were just like, well, the risk of trying to go around is much too high.
Well, meanwhile, Catherine was working away. It was voting day on Thursday, and we're not allowed to cover any politics on Thursday, so it was a bit of a lull day for you. And that's when you started to get the bad news.
I woke up at 6 o'clock and they'd arranged a proxy vote from Bali, and I thought, I better check how they want me to vote. So I tried to ring them at 6 o'clock. He didn't pick up. Tried to ring Andrew. He didn't pick up. Thought, they'll get back within a few minutes. They were amazing at keeping in touch. And they didn't. And after about 15 minutes, I thought, I'll go see where they are. I tracked on Find My Phone. And Matthew's last location was 2 days ago at the top of a volcano. And I was a bit worried then, but I thought, oh, it's a glitch, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then I got a text from a friend saying, can you give us a call? A bit worried about them. Then spoke to a girl they'd befriended who was in Sweden, but they'd met on their travels. And she told me that they'd gone up the mountain. By the time I found out, they'd been missing for 30 hours. They'd gone up the mountain on the Tuesday night, British time. This was the Thursday morning, without a guide. And they'd told her it was really hard. And she told them to turn back, but they hadn't. And they'd sent screenshots from this app with this trail that they were following on the app, screenshots of the app in case there was a problem, and a Snapchat of a Matthew avatar at the top. And she said, I know they made it to the top because I could see that his phone had nearly died. But the trail had actually closed many years ago. So the app, we will need to make sure that that gets taken off the app. But, you know, technology saved them in the end because it was the screenshots and it was the messages that they'd sent. But they should never have been without a guide.
And Catherine, for context, you've got 3 children.
Yeah.
You sadly lost your husband just a few years ago, 2021, and there you were, fearing for the lives of your boys. What was running through your mind?
Yeah, I have a 15-year-old and my 90-year-old dad was down staying. He'd been looking after the 15-year-old while I'd been on the election campaign. But my husband had died of a heart attack very suddenly, shortly after I started working here in 2021. So I've literally got the 3 of them. And before they'd gone away, I'd said to them, you know, please be careful. I can't take any more trauma. And on the Monday, I'd spoken to them and I couldn't talk to them for long because I was with the Prime Minister it was a gin tasting, the then Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, on a visit to a gin distillery. I was about to go and taste gin. And I was like, I can't talk to you for long. And they'd mentioned a hike in passing, but I didn't know the details. And I said to them, look, don't go off on your own. You know, people get lost. Jay Slater, Michael Mosley, go in a group. And Matthew's exact words to me were, Mum, we're not stupid.
Turns out teenage boys can be a bit stupid.
Yeah, well, boys
Thank goodness.
Boys are boys, aren't they?
And
You've got boys.
You know,
You've got a boy.
my eldest too is similar age to those. Would absolutely, I could imagine him doing that. The thing is, they think they're invincible,
don't they?
Of course
they do, yeah.
And poor Catherine, she's been through so much.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, her 2 boys are lifeguards at our local pool. And I'd never met them, but I knew they lived in the area. And I was swimming one day and I saw these 2 boys and I said, who's your mum? They thought I was a bit mad. And they said, why? I said, is it Catherine Forster?
Redheads.
Yes, it is. And I said, I work with your mum at GB News. And they are lovely, lovely, sensible, kind boys. They just
They just put their mum through the ringer, but they're back safe, and that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Up next, we're going to Westminster. It's a big day. Lots of MPs now enrolling as MPs, being sworn in for the first time. There will also be the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Will he be reinstated? Of course he will, because he's a good Speaker. All that coming up after this.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
No one wants their child to be a fussy eater. But what is the secret to expanding your child's culinary horizons?
Is there a way to get kids away from the kids' menu, the fish fingers, the chips? Joining us now is the UK's top-selling author of children's cookery books, Annabelle Carmel. Good morning, Annabelle.
Thank you. So lovely to be here.
So, first of all, what's the issue with kids just having the traditional easy meals like fish fingers, you know, chips, beans?
It really depends if they've got preservatives in them, if they're full of salt. So I like to make them myself, and it's really easy. So I make my own chicken glazed nuggets, and super easy to make using proper pieces of chicken. You can cook them in the air fryer now, which is absolutely brilliant, so you need to fry them. And I think that it's really important that children grow up loving good food, because they make their minds up by the age of 5 what they like and what they don't like, and it's quite difficult to change their minds after that. But it's good to know that fussy eating is genetic. It's not to do with your cooking.
Oh,
that's not to say that you can't do something about it. So I've written many, many books, and I have an app with 1,000 recipes on it, and a lot of how to make your own junk food, how to make your own isolitas out of fresh fruit.
Yes.
How to make your own pizzas. I make the most amazing homemade pizza. I actually brought you some cookies here.
So these are your books here. So my first cookbook, that's for how old children?
That's from the age of 1.
OK, and you've got a weaning one at the end, the baby one?
Yes, that's my very first book. I lost my first child. It was really sad. She died at the age of 3 months. And my second child was the world's worst eater. And I wrote that book as my legacy to Natasha, never thinking that it would start a whole career.
Oh, bless you.
It sold millions of copies, and it's so popular.
Is it quite pivotal and important that you introduce kids to the weaning stage, or, you know, how important?
It's very important, because the processed weaning food in pouches or jars, it's heated, so a lot of the vitamins aren't there anymore, so making your own is so easy and much cheaper.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
11:20.
This is Britain's Newsroom. You know that by now. I'm Bev Turner and this is Andrew Pearce.
So we're going back to Downing Street to talk to our political editor, Chris Hope. The Prime Minister's chaired his second cabinet meeting since the general election. And I think he's there now. Chris Hope. Is he there? So he's also been meeting with new Scottish Labour MPs, of which there are a flipping lot. There he is. There's Chris Hope. Chris, it's raining. There you are. You get a Labour government, it doesn't stop raining.
It really is raining again and again. Whenever I'm standing in front of the screen talking to you, Andrew and Bev, it's always pouring with rain in Downing Street. But never mind, we soldier on, as does the government. It's day 5 of this government. Of course, today you'll see on GB News the new Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, the old Speaker sworn in again for the new term, I should say, so Lindsay Hoyle. And then we'll see, of course, Sir Keir Starmer. He'll be third to take the oath to the King after the father of the House, Edward Lee, and the mother of the House, Diane Abbott. Then we'll see Keir Starmer. Then we should see the leader of the opposition, Rishi Sunak, both probably wishing each other well, talking about the election. It's more of a general knockabout as MPs cram in. The numbers of Labour MPs will be quite interesting. They'll be all down the government benches, overflowing. They've been told by whips they can't go on to the other side, Andrew and Bev, so the other side should have the Lib Dems opposite them at the far end of the Speaker's chair, where the SNP were in great number in the last Parliament, and then the Tory party towards the Speaker's chair, the 130 or so Tory MPs. So all change. This is democracy. This is how it works. And I think you've heard earlier from the 12 Metro mayors there in there seeing the Prime Minister for their first meeting ever as a group. 11 plus 1 Tory, all Labour plus 1 Tory. That went well. Ben Houchin said he found it a very positive meeting. You heard language there from Tracy Brabin. She called it a productive discussion about how we'll grow our economies. After that, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, he held his cabinet, the second one after the one on Saturday, the second one in the past 4 days. He said he wants them all to focus on growth in their departmental areas and also move that cabinet around the country. So we'll be seeing a lot more so-called regional cabinets, I think, as this PM tries to ensure that growth happens across the country. A big change, well, a smallish change today, is the Department of Levelling Up, Housing, Communities and Local Government has had its name changed back to simply the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. The idea of levelling up, that Boris Johnson term, has gone along with the Tory government.
Interesting. Christopher, there'll be loads of new... You'll know the number of how many MPs who haven't been MPs before. Brand new, wet behind the ear. And there's sort of details of democracy that we don't really consider, but this is the sort of day to do it. What will life look like for them now? I mean, some of them, of course, will have kept job positions on hold. They'll have had jobs they'll have had to resign from on Friday morning. I mean, it's a huge transformation for those individuals. What happens now for them?
Yes, well, they'll be shown into their offices. I mean, as things stand, I think MPs have until Monday, the old MPs who lost their seats, to vacate the premises. I was at an event last night, I think Andrew was there, a birthday party for, I say a birthday party, more of a leadership campaign launch party for Tom Tugendhat, who's standing to, we think will be standing to be Tory leader. Lots of, frankly, bitter and quite sad Tory MPs. They're trying to scramble around, get their gear out. They've been told by the 1922 committee and the party HQ they'll be paid probably for those longer serving MPs until April next year. So there's quite a big cushion, I think, for the MPs leaving Parliament, although they're very upset with Rishi Sunak. He's currently been ringing around them. To be fair to him, it's almost a masochistic strategy by Rishi Sunak, ringing around these Tory MPs to apologise, and some of them put the phone down on him. Some aren't happy at all. And it carries on. So today, the 22 committee elects his new chairman, and tomorrow, unbelievably you might think, but perhaps bravely, Mr Sunak is going to address the 1922 committee. Now that's going to be an extraordinary meeting because some Tory MPs, as Andrew knows from last night, are absolutely spitting tacks about having this early election. They could be in power for 6 more months if they just held their nerve, but they're not. And instead of going to NATO summit in Washington, like I'll be going to later with the Prime Minister, Mr Sunak is going to be beaten up by his backbenchers tomorrow. That's his fault, though, and it's all on him, and he's making clear he owns that defeat last week. New MPs, though, they're being shown around. There's quite a big operation, a kind of an HR operation, if you like, Bev, in Parliament at the moment. They're being walked around all their offices and shown where to go and how to wear their special lanyards and where to go. So there's lots of help for them to get started. Their big thing, though, before I leave you, is to do these big maiden speeches on a policy area they care about, and they will happen over the coming weeks. But as things stand, this week is all about swearing them in. That takes a while.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Christopher Hope there. It literally hasn't stopped raining, has it, since Labour came to power?
The dawn of a new era.
Piers Pottinger.
Well, it started raining when Rishi called the election.
It did, actually. Very good. Yeah.
I mean...
Drowning Street.
Drowning Street, yeah. Well, I mean, but some of these MPs who Chris has just been saying are so bitter, actually, a lot of it's their fault too, because the party was split, divided.
Yeah.
The Tory rebels, how often did we read about them? And if they had been a united party and put a brave front on it, as they used to do in old times, and kept their differences behind closed doors, they'd look a very different party, and it would have been a much better campaign.
Suella Braverman attacking the Tories the day before the election.
Yes, well, I mean, that was stupid. And I think Suella Braverman is very much yesterday's person. I don't think she's got any chance of being the next leader. And I'm sorry, but I think we've had enough of her. And she hasn't achieved anything. And, of course, the Rwanda scheme was completely hopeless from day one, was never going to work, and hasn't worked, and is over. So...
Yeah.
Barrister Sam Fowles is also with us. Sam, let's talk about this story that broke yesterday in Rachel Reeves's speech. This is about the Labour government now lifting this de facto ban, effectively it was, on new onshore wind farms. Is this the solution to all of our energy perils?
Well, it could be part of the solution. It's good to see. I like that wind farms are going to be treated the same way as any other infrastructure project. So that means that they go to...
Are you a human rights barrister for wind farms now?
Yes.
That wind farms have their rights.
Yes, rights for wind farms. But I don't think we're going to get rights for wind farms, though, because the biggest bottleneck is the national grid. So, yes, we've removed one bar to wind farms, but it takes, at the moment, up to 10 years to get any new, whether it's a solar farm, a wind farm or whatever, anything new plugged into the national grid. And so there's about 200 billion of investment currently just sort of gummed up.
Why does it take 10 years?
Because the national grid isn't big enough. We don't have the grid, it doesn't go to enough places, it doesn't have enough capacity. So we're in a really problematic situation where you've got solar farms, for example, being proposed not where a solar farm is going to work and be really effective and also not cause problems for the local community, but where it can get a grid connection. And so you've got local communities really, in many cases, justifiably angry about these things because they're in the wrong place. And even when they're plugged in, they're not going to be as effective as they could be because they're in the wrong place. So Labour, it's all very well to remove footnotes 57 and 58 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which is what it is, but that's got to be the first step. It can't be the last step.
Ed Miliband is very excited about this, Piers.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, we're very excited about our climate emergency.
I'm told that Green Energy, the company he's heading up, is now known as AMD. Another Miliband disaster. And when Starmer went up to Scotland to see Swinney, he promised that Green Energy Limited was going to be based in Scotland. And, of course, that's one way of making sure Miliband stays as far away from Westminster as possible.
Because they didn't let him out at all during the election.
No. I mean, I think, you know, and what the Labour Party are going to do, the metro elitism is coming out of every pore. They're ruining the countryside. So they're going to put 1.5 million homes up. They're going to put all these wind farms up. They're going to put the data centres and lots of new prisons, which will, I'm sure, delight all the people in the countryside. And this shows that A, it's impractical. B, it's how long is this going to take? As Sam has quite rightly pointed out, it's going to take a long time to get this stuff happening. And certainly you can't build 1.5 million homes in even 5 years, to be realistic. But then the very big issue is how on earth are they going to pay for it? And it's obvious now they're going to be whacking up our taxes and putting a special duty on driving for cars, pay by the mile. All of this is coming, all of the stuff they were terrified about having to admit during their election campaign. But it's happening, and it's going to happen very quick.
Piers makes a point about the countryside too. A lot of these areas where we might get these big housing estates, if they're going to build 1.5 million houses, Sam, in 5 years, they're going to be in true blue areas which have now got Labour MPs.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a problem for Rachel Reeves because the local MP might have a very small majority, Labour, and say, not in my backyard, mate. The old problem.
I realise this is not a debate because I'm going to agree with Piers again and say it's both a political problem but it's also a policy problem. So, and again, with the houses, the housing plan is to make it easier to build on the green belt or bits of the green belt that they're calling the grey belt. But the problem with that is, again, they're looking at the wrong bottleneck. There are 1 million permissions extant for houses. You could build 1 million houses or start building 1 million houses tomorrow if you wanted to get on with it. No, they've got the permission.
The developers build
they've got. So the bottleneck isn't people getting planning permission; it's people building out the planning permissions that they've got. So what Labour really run a risk of doing is really annoying loads of people in true blue constituencies or people in the country, which is a political problem, but it's also a democratic problem.
But why aren't the developers building?
They wait for the land. They're waiting for the land values to.
Yeah, the incentive is to hold on to the land so the land value goes up.
Going on for years.
Because you make more. When you build a home, when you build something, you take a financial risk, right? Because you've got to put money into doing that.
Got to buy it.
Yeah. Whereas if you keep the value of the land going up, and it will go up because it's got planning permission, so that helps it go up.
And how can it
much less risky?
We need to go, but actually, well, mandatory house building targets, which is what she said yesterday. I mean,
so central government knows better than local councils.
Well, that's the problem.
We're going to be having
I don't think so.
More in the next 4 years, is it not? Don't go anywhere. Time for your latest news with Mark White.
Good morning, it's 11:32. I'm Mark White in the GB News Centre. Labour ministers will sit on the government front benches for the first time in 14 years when Parliament returns this afternoon. 643 MPs will gather to elect a Speaker, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle expected to put himself forward once again. They'll also swear an oath, and Sir Keir Starmer will speak for the first time at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. The new cabinet met this morning for the second time in just 3 days. Ministers departed Downing Street after discussing Sir Keir Starmer's key priorities for the first 100 days in office. At the heart of that agenda are moves to radically boost economic growth, build hundreds of thousands of new homes and tackle illegal immigration. Well, tonight the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Sir Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between Britain and America. The summit comes as world leaders condemn Russia's missile attack on the main children's hospital in Kyiv. These are live pictures at the scene of that strike as rescuers continue to sift through the rubble. Ukraine's President Zelensky says 37 people, including 3 children, are now confirmed to have died. Well, some breaking news now, and 3 people have been arrested after a man was shot dead in Walsall in the West Midlands. The victim, who was in his 20s, died at the scene. Another man was also wounded and is receiving treatment to his injuries, which are not believed to be life-threatening. All 3 men arrested remain in custody as West Midlands police detectives continue with their investigation. Pay negotiations are set to get underway between England's junior doctors and the new government. Representatives from the British Medical Association will meet Department of Health officials to try to end the long-running dispute. 11 strikes over 20 months have caused widespread disruption to millions of appointments. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2807 and €1.1836 euros. The price of gold is £1,845 and 92 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,196 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Mark White. Now, up at noon, Good Afternoon Britain with Emily and Tom. They are here with us. What have you got on the show today, guys?
Oh, it's an exciting day today.
because
all these new MPs.
All these new MPs are going to be flooding into Westminster. Around about 2 o'clock, we'll start seeing that. And there's quite a ceremony that goes on to elect the new Speaker. Now, everyone knows it's still going to be Sir Lindsay Hoyle, but there's the sort of rigmarole and ceremony that involve, for the first time since the election, Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak having to stand next to one another and walk from the Commons to the Lords. I am so fascinated to see their body language. Will they chat? Of course, famously, when Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson walked next to each other in the same thing, they didn't exchange a single word.
Yeah.
Now, will they be more magnanimous this time?
I think there will be a few pleasantries, don't you?
And of course, when the Speaker is elected, he will be literally physically dragged to the Speaker's chair. David Davis is one of them. I don't know who the other one is.
It might be Father of the House.
Might be Sir Edward Lee. And it was nearly Jeremy Corbyn, because if it had been the other way round and Corbyn had been sworn in a few seconds earlier, he would be Father of the House.
Could you imagine independent Jeremy Corbyn?
Yeah,
I want to know, because this is irking me, what you make of all this mayors getting more power under this new devolution bill. I'm very worried about this.
And they will soon be knocking on the door saying, forget the power, we want the money.
Well,
and they will cause it. They will be the real
recipe for more tax increases.
Hang on.
He's missed the devolution, though.
I think this is a thoroughly good thing. It could be that we have a massive Labour majority in Westminster for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Isn't it going to be a good thing in local areas if people think, hang on, my taxes are too high, hang on, there's too much overbearance here, if we can get ourselves a Ben Houchen, if we can get ourselves an Andy Street?
We're not the United States of America, though. We're quite a small nation.
The state of Wyoming is half a million
What we've seen with
people.
devolution so far is the fragmentation of our country rather than bringing everyone together.
Well,
no, I'm in favour.
Between midday and 3 o'clock, Emily and Tom.
And of course, you'll see Nigel Farage taking his seat.
Yes, very exciting.
Now,
quite a moment.
Andrew, can you guess what's coming up next? Take it away.
They'll always hit you and hurt you, defend and attack. There's only one way to beat them. Get round the back, catch if you can, because I'm the England man. No idea what this is about. This is Britain's Newsroom. I just read what I'm told. Is it something to do with football?
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Rain moves north today, a dreary day in many places with some very soggy weather around. Increasingly humid in the south, meanwhile, where we did see some persistent wet weather through the day on Monday. That wet weather is now moving north into southern and central Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales. Some heavy and prolonged outbreaks of rain here. Quite a breeze as well, so all in all, a miserable day to come. A lot of cloud across the UK with some heavy showers developing through central and southern parts of the UK. And it's going to feel a bit more humid in the south with highs of 20 or 21 Celsius. Some brightness will come through from time to time, but the brightest skies will actually be across northern Scotland, where it will be largely dry, aside from the odd shower. And it will be on the cool side, 13 to 14 Celsius, but a lot more pleasant than further south into the central belt, where the rain turns heavier into the evening, with that rain continuing for much of the afternoon, evening and overnight. Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain, heavy showers through northern England, as well as the east of England. Some brighter skies emerging for Wales and the southwest early evening. But for many places, we keep a lot of low cloud and a gloomy feel to the day. Now, overnight, the rain continues on its journey north into northern Scotland, but it also carries on raining across Northern Ireland and northern England, showers further south, and a mild night to come with 13 to 15 Celsius for many places. But we start off Wednesday again with a lot of cloud cover, further showers or longer spells of rain for many places. Now, for southern parts, it will brighten up into the afternoon with conditions ending up mostly dry. Plenty of sunshine for the far south, but in the far north, the rain continues and it's going to be very wet for northeast Scotland, with the risk of localised flooding.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:41.
That was a football wrap, apparently.
Apparently, what Andrew just got to read out there was the John Barnes football rap.
Shall I do it again?
Should we do it
I'll do it again. OK. They'll always hit you and hurt you. Defend and attack. There's only one way to beat them. Get round the back. Catch me if you can, because I'm the England man.
It's very good. I mean, it was sort of more poetry that time as opposed to rap, but I liked it.
Well, it's because I was just baffled. At first, I thought it was something to do with bully dogs. I thought this was about bully dogs or football.
Right, let's see what everyone's been saying at home. Brenda said, scrap all the mares.
Well, it would save a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of you are saying this, actually. S. Atkinson says, I've never agreed with devolution. Giving mayors whose skills are undisclosed massive powers without democracy means they can never truly represent the people they are meant to be serving. Several years ago, there was a local survey in my area where nearly 80% of people were against it, but once again, the people were ignored. We needed local referendums more about devolution before any government introduced new unwanted mayors and further devolution. Yeah, a lot of you aren't a big fan of this idea of devolution.
No, well, it's another layer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another layer of government, another layer of expense, another layer of bureaucracy.
It does feel like that. I tell you what I've heard a lot in the last 24, 48 hours is a lot about task forces.
Oh,
they love a task force, don't they, Labour?
And you think, what? We live in London. How has the London Mayor Sadiq Khan improved any of our lives? He's brought in that wretched ultra-low emission zone. He's expanded it.
Yeah.
Cycle lanes everywhere.
Oh, this
turned London into a car park.
Broken.
Parts of it are 20 mile an hour, like that idiot man who did it in Wales.
It's awful.
What's the point?
Jen raises a good point. Rachel Reeves' tax advisor on LBC floated the idea of means testing states' pensions as he's linked them to other benefits. This would break the social contract between the government and all workers. I could totally see them doing that.
And if you remember during the election campaign, the Tories said they would bring in a legislation to ensure that that the state pension is never taxed, and Labour refused to sign up to it. So is that coming? Because that would be means testing.
Yeah.
They'd tax it.
Wind farms as well. Michelle has said wind farms are ugly, expensive and will have to be buried in massive turbine graves in 25 years. You're so right, Michelle. This is what people don't realise. They are vast, the wind turbines. You don't realise when we see them on the telly. When you see them in person, they're enormous.
And they're noisy.
And you can't recycle them.
And they're noisy.
So landfill with wind turbines.
And Rachel Reeves said the ban on onshore wind farms is absurd. And yet we know that the water-based turbine farms are much more productive.
And you know,
of course they are.
Yeah, of course they are. And you know what?
And more environmentally friendly.
GB News has suddenly got renewed purpose under this new regime, because it was all very well holding the Tories to account, and we did that. I think we did that well.
We did.
But actually now what we've got is BBC, Channel 4, Sky News are not going to ask the tough questions of this administration, because I think they largely sort of agree with what they're doing. So, GB News, I'm sorry, but you're going to need us. You're really going to need us in the next 4 to 5 years. Don't you agree?
I do. I certainly do. I certainly do. And we're going to get these ministers and Labour MPs on TV. There'll be a lot more of them coming on, of course, because they're now in power. There's only 121 Tory MPs, and as I said to David Davis the other day, the Tories should crawl under a stone for a few months, because people don't want to hear any more from them. We've heard quite enough. Have their arguments in private, sort themselves out, and come up with a leader in 6 months' time.
Yeah. You're going to need us. You really are. Send biscuits. We've not had any biscuits today. Send biscuits.
I have to provide my own again.
Keep Britain's newsroom on air. You're such a diva.
Are hard.
You and Jennifer Lopez, you got so much in common.
Times are very hard.
Right, still to come. We're going over to Germany to soak up the atmosphere for England's semi-finals in the Euros against Netherlands tomorrow. Andrew might do another football wrap. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The Royal Academy's annual exhibition has returned for the 256th time to brighten the summer holidays. It's the world's oldest open submission exhibition. Anyone can enter work to be considered for inclusion. I'm joined now by art critic JJ Charlesworth for his verdict. What is your verdict?
My verdict is you should go and see it. You are confronted with many things of varying quality, selected by artists, and you very much, instead of being given something to you that's supposed to be good, you have to make your own decision.
I went along yesterday, and I personally did see some pictures on the wall that I thought were absolutely stunning. I'm going to mention Peter Ucker, which I think is a remark. And now these are the two by Ben Jonson, Grundtvig 1, and we've got one coming out of Berlin Pool. I think that's an absolutely stunning piece of work. And then Claire Douglas should be up. Here we are, Claire Douglas.
Yes.
Souvenir from the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
That last one, actually, a very witty painting.
A piece like that was really interesting. I think it caught a lot of people's eye because it had very kind of humorous, slightly bleak take on post-Brexit Britain. It's set in this fictitious world of Brummington, which is a sort of loose satire on Birmingham. I thought it was a bit mean.
I think we had maybe Black Lives Matter. We had Boris Johnson. I think our own Jacob Rees-Mogg made his way into the painting.
Yeah, so there's definitely a slant, a political slant, on the part of the artist. But even that said, I thought it was an interesting and enjoyable work, even though maybe you don't agree with the artist on what they're trying to say. And I think that actually made for an interesting moment because you're seeing that people are disagreeing, right? Both through the artwork and in front of artworks.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Apparently, it's the semi-finals of the Euros tomorrow, and of course, as you'll know, we're playing the Netherlands. Come on, England!
Oh, your heart was nearly in that. And our very own Andrew Pearce is going to be dressing up in England kit tomorrow. Hang on, I'm not here tomorrow. I'm on holiday tomorrow. Is this tomorrow?
Well, it's
I might change my holiday.
I'm only wearing the shirt. I said I'd wear the full kit if we got in the No, if we get in the final, I'll wear the full kit.
You said you were getting your knees out.
But here's the thing. I don't have an England shirt. Somebody's going to have to get me one. And I don't want somebody's smelly one that they're going to get out of the laundry basket, if you don't mind.
Honestly, diva. Right, our man on the ground in Dortmund, Jack Carson, joins us
And he'll be in his England shirt.
No, he's not. Morning, Jack. Right, where are you? What's the atmosphere like in the build-up to tomorrow night?
Well, we're here in Dortmund city centre. This is where tens of thousands of England fans are meant to be gathering over the next 24 hours. We've started to see now a little bit of a trickle, a few England shirts. Maybe one of them can give one of theirs to Andrew to borrow tomorrow. But a few England shirts that are starting to trickle in here into the city centre ahead, of course, of that semi-final, England's second European Championship semi-final in a row, and the last two attempts. And Gareth Southgate, you know, has got the criticism, hasn't he? He's had the criticism over this tournament so far for how well and how poorly maybe rather England have played so far in this tournament, but he's certainly managed to get us this far, which is certainly more successful maybe than we've been in previous tournaments when we've seen the heartbreak that we've had. So there's been plenty of things to talk about in this tournament, on the performances and on the pitch, but off the pitch, the England fans have been following this team around Germany, some of them now, as I mentioned, starting to arrive in Dortmund. We spoke to a few of them that have already got here earlier on.
So Jack, now, are you going to be watching the match? Are you going to be watching it in a bar with all the England fans with a large stein of lager and some bratwurst?
Well, when we were in Dusseldorf, all down the street there was TVs outside. There were people drinking beer. I mean, just here you can see there's quite a few tellies actually. They're already set up here, ready, because of course we've got the first semi-final tonight, Spain versus France. So England will be looking very carefully tonight to see who of course we might well be facing if we do manage to get to that final in Berlin. So there's plenty of TVs, plenty of chairs, and I'm sure plenty of people that'll be out here later on. 75,000 Dutch fans are apparently set to be making the trip here to Dortmund, because the border with the Netherlands is only about an hour away from here where we are in Dortmund. So 75,000 orange Holland fans are meant to be coming over, 30,000 England fans. So that clash is going to be quite interesting when they start to have a bit of a chant off, I'm sure, later on and into tomorrow ahead of that semi-final.
Has the atmosphere been largely friendly though, Jack? It doesn't seem like there's been some of the troubles that we sometimes associate with football matches.
Yeah, I think certainly when we were in Dusseldorf for that quarter-final, there were Germans on the street. Of course, there was lots of Swiss fans, lots of Dutch fans as well, England fans, and everyone just seems to be having a bit of friendly banter with each other, really. So it's all been quite light-hearted. It's all been quite well-humoured. And as I was mentioning, we have been speaking to a few England fans who have already arrived here in Dortmund a little bit earlier on. Here's what they told us.
I think we got one of the best squads in the tournament. I think we've progressed. You know, we've got to play our own football. Yeah, just play our own football, get at them.
Yeah. Can I put you to a score prediction?
2-0 England.
I think we do a good performance. So I think I'm a little bit more optimistic, to be honest.
At the end of the day, you know, we're England. We're going to win it, definitely, 100%. I'm confident.
Optimistic, I think. Yeah, I think we do a big game. I think the players have got it in them to produce. I think we've got a good chance.
So there's some nice, quiet confidence, I think, from the England fans there. They realised, they've been out here watching some of these games, going to the stadiums. They've realised that maybe that criticism of Gareth Southgate maybe hasn't been as justified as maybe it's been seemingly over the past few weeks. England are in another semi-final, all eyes here in Dortmund on Wednesday.
Jack, just a quick question. What's the response like from the England fans when you see the GB News mic?
We have met that many GB News viewers out here. It's been quite incredible. Every time we've gone up to them, oh, where are you from? GB News. Oh, yeah, we watch GB News. So, yeah, it's been quite fun to see that support out here in Germany as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for representing us over there in Dortmund.
Come on, England. Come on, England. I'm not going to sing that rap again, though.
No,
I promise you.
Emily and Tom, save us from this. We'll see you soon.
Can I do the rap again?
No.
You want me to? No. That's enough.
Well, it's back to school for members of Parliament, and there'll be some professorial marches of Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer next to each other for the first time since the election. Not just that, some naughty schoolboys at the back, perhaps kicking up a fuss. What will Nigel Farage do? We'll have it live.
We will indeed. And what do you make of Labour's plans to hand our mayors more powers? Do you think that's good for democracy or bad? Could it be very costly indeed? Let us know your experience of your local mayor.
And all that to come and more. We'll also be discussing, should the UK spend more on defence? All to come after your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some places having some fine weather today, but for most of us, expect rain. Could be quite heavy, and for many it's going to be a cool day as well. Already raining across much of northern England, North Wales, that rain spreading into Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland. Further south, the rain is more on and off, with parts of the Midlands largely dry through this morning. Some heavy showers possible across the far southeast of England, and actually northwest Scotland generally staying fine through the day. Some good spells of sunshine here. If it brightens up later over northern England and parts of the Midlands, feeling quite warm and humid, that may spark some heavy and thundery showers. But for much of the day, southern and central Scotland is going to be wet, and that rain is drifting up into northeastern Scotland. And once it arrives here, it's going to last through the night and indeed for most of tomorrow as well. But for most of today, at least, the Highlands and the Western Isles and the Northern Isles of Scotland dry and bright. Most of Northern Ireland, though, dull and soggy. That rain will be heavy in places here too. Brightening up over northern England and the Midlands this afternoon. Quite warm and humid here, but that could spark some thundery showers. Quite a lot of cloud across the south with some showers here, but the heaviest rain further north in this band, and as I said, once it sets in over particularly northeast Scotland, likely to last through the night and for much of tomorrow as well. Still some heavy showers this evening over northern England, and we'll see more showers coming in through the night across parts of the south, staying fairly wet too for much of Northern Ireland. Quite a warm night with temperatures in towns and cities holding up at 14 or 15. The rain persisting over parts of northern Scotland. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. That rain could cause some disruption. A different day over northwest Scotland with outbreaks of rain here. Slowly further south we'll see something a bit brighter, some good spells of sunshine, but still a potential for 1 or 2 showers, staying fairly cloudy with some showery rain for Northern Ireland and northwest England. Some brightness in the south, seeing temperatures in the 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Summer could be a scorcher, with your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date. It's totally tax-free, which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free